Christian Bale steals the show as Gorr the God Butcher in Thor 4, but what's the story behind his deadly Necrosword? And what does it mean for the future of the MCU? Keep watching to find out.
All gods will die.
The Marvel Cinematic Universe is packed with iconic weapons and costumes used by the countless heroes and villains across the multiverse, and it is committed to expanding that armory in Thor: Love and Thunder. In the sequel from Thor Ragnarok, director Taika Waititi, Thor heads off on a quest to rediscover himself after the events of Avengers Endgame, and he winds up crossing paths with Gorr the God Butcher in the process. In late June, Gorr actor Christian Bale told Total Film he was concerned about Gorr's minimal costume in the comics, telling the outlet, "I thought they don't have the right man for that." And then Taika quickly dispelled any notions of running around in that. "But I always did think what he could do with this in front of a blue screen. He could chuck on whatever he wants later on." Thankfully, the live-action version of Gorr is a little more covered up, and the film does give the villain his iconic weapon, the Necrosword. Gorr uses the jet black weapon with a devastating fury in the highly anticipated sequel, especially in a brutal fight with Thor, Jane, and Valkyrie in the Necroverse. But the origins of the Necrosword in the MCU are just as murky as the blade itself. The object has a fascinating history in the comics, and it could mean that a huge villain is somewhere on the horizon. As far as the MCU is concerned, Thor: Love and Thunder never actually confirms who the Necrosword belongs to before Gorr gains control of it. Instead, Thor explains it's been passed down since the dawn of time, and it corrupts anyone who uses it, infecting them with darkness until they die. When Gorr first gets his hands on it, it's next to a dead knight wearing a bulky set of black armor who's clearly succumbed to its influence. In the comics, Gorr's Necrosword belongs to Null the symbiote god before the Thor villain gets his claws on it. In Donny Cates' Venom number 4, the villain recounts his origin to Eddie Brock, explaining that billions of years in the past, he lived alone in a void that quickly became the battleground for a celestial war. Because they invade Null's empty kingdom, he conjures a sword out of the void and beheads a celestial before turning its severed head into a forge where he makes the Necrosword a permanent weapon. Essentially, it's a blade of living darkness that also traps the soul of anything it kills inside it. Because Null is a key part of the Venom mythology, it seems likely that Sony has the rights to use Null however it sees fit, even though the studio bought the rights to Spider-Man and his related characters a number of years before the villain debuted in the comics. As such, this is probably why co-writers Taika Waititi and Jennifer Kayden Robinson use an ambiguous figure rather than acknowledging the Null of it all. It's unclear if the two studios could or would strike a deal for Null to appear in the MCU, but it seems far more likely that he'd show up in a future Venom film with Tom Hardy's symbiotic antihero first.
All of us should be able to live together upon this ball of rock.
It's also worth pointing out that the Necrosword is also called the All Black, and it's actually the very first symbiote. Yes, the sword is technically alive. What's interesting is that it also cloaks Null in a set of black armor with a red insignia on the front, which gives the immortal villain a terrifying look. So the Dead Knight in the opening of Thor: Love and Thunder clearly a nod to the Necrosword's origins without getting into the messy implications of Null himself being in the MCU. Gorr briefly meets Null in Thor: God of Thunder number 6, where the villain reveals his origin to an imprisoned Volstagg. The issue explains that Gorr is exiled from his tribe for his rage against the gods, and shortly after he stumbles on an armored Null fighting a golden god in the desert, although their fight has ended in a stalemate because they've impaled each other. All Black quickly jumps into Gorr's hand as a dagger, and he uses it to kill the golden god in revenge for the deaths of his mother, his wife, and his daughter over the years. That's not too far from the film's opening, where Gorr stumbles into Rapu's realm and uses the discarded weapon to kill his former idol. The Necrosword's symbiote abilities are a huge part of the film too, as Gorr brings monstrous black berserkers out of the abyss inside the Necrosword to plague the Asgardians and steal the children of New Asgard. When the villain kills several gods in Thor: God of Thunder number 1 and number 3, he leaves a few berserkers behind as sentries to slaughter anyone investigating their deaths. Taika Waititi clearly did his homework. Check out one of our newest videos right here. Plus, even more Looper videos about Thor: Love and Thunder are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.